The Democratic Alliance Policy Conference kicks off today after its initial date in April was postponed due to the lockdown. The party's policy vision is based on documents titled Values and Principles, Economic Justice, Vision for Local Government and Policy Priority Areas. It comes in the same week as long-standing member John Moody resigned, citing the dominance of white conservatives and the purging of black leaders. He's facing charges of misconduct. To discuss what we can expect ahead of this conference, we're joined by Newzroom Afrika's politics editor, Sbu Ngalwa. Sbu, thank you for your time and thank you for joining us on Weekend Dawn. Sbu, it seems as though things are quite different in the DA. If you look at how they were or where they were a whole year ago, a lot has changed. So this is going to be an interesting weekend for the official opposition.
Of course, Jacob, a lot has changed in the DA because I think that around this time last year, they still had a black leader. Fast forward to that, I think Musa resigned in October, if I'm not mistaken. Fast forward to now, the party is having its policy conference, but also more importantly, it's going towards its national conference in October, where we expect that contest between Balin Tuli and John Steenhuisen. But what is more glaring, actually, Jacob, about this policy conference is actually that it is totally closed to the media. Now, that is unprecedented. I mean, the DA, in one of its documents today, is where it talks about its values and principles, and it has transparency as one of its values and principles. Now, you can see the irony there, where transparency is about opening yourself up to interrogation and scrutiny, but the DA has decided that it wants to close up its entire policy conference. And I can tell you this, Jacob, no other party in this country, including the EFF, which is always accused of being anti-democratic, has totally closed off its conferences to the media. What that tells me is that the DA is dealing with internal strife, and it actually smacks of a party which has something to hide. Perhaps they don't know there's something that's meant to be happening inside that they do not want us to see, or wanting to control, rather.
And that actually leads me to my next question about the unity within the DA, especially on such a tough week for the DA with John Moody resigning from the Democratic Alliance. The unity there, it shows that there is no unity, surely, and it shows that things aren't okay. So what you're saying about this transparency, it just gives a proper indication that things within the DA are tougher than what it looks like on the outside.
John Moody could not have resigned at a worse time for the DA, Jacob. Regardless of what the party says, the reality is that his departure does hurt them. And also, even though they say that he was facing charges, what he had to say is actually in line with what all other senior black leaders of the DA have had to say before leaving that party. So it cannot be that they all suddenly realize this. I'm sure whether he was facing charges or not, there is something that is fundamentally wrong within the DA. So that departure of John Moody does overshadow this policy conference, but also there is a feeling that as they go into the policy conference, they are merely there to rubber stamp ideas, not merely to debate ideas, but to rubber stamp proposals which are generated by the dominant faction within the DA. That's the faction that is led by Steenhuisen, and also has Helen Zille at its core, which Gwen Gwenya, who's the head of policy, is part of. But I think, Jacob, with time we can probably talk about some of the things that they want to, some of their proposals perhaps, and just explore those a bit.
I think something that will come out as well from this policy conference, and it will be interesting to see how the DA deals with it, is the issue of race and transformation. I think just those two words alone talk volumes about what the internal struggles are of the DA. So when it comes to race and transformation, what, in your opinion, do you think the DA will address in their policy conference this weekend?
Look, the DA always finds it difficult to deal with that issue. Whenever it comes up, it always tries to either deflect and not deal with it directly. I mean, this is the as one of its proposals, the DA actually says it is totally against race-based quotas, and that it wants to do away with the broad-based black economic empowerment and rather replace it with the universally accepted social development goals of the United Nations. Now, the SDGs of the United Nations are well and good, and they actually they talk about ending poverty, ending unemployment, living in a fair society. But the reality is, within a South African context, and what the DA is talking about, it talks of an open society, open opportunity society for all. And what that open society for all means is that they are going to create a space where everyone is suddenly equal. It's like some utopian ideal where you, as black people, you're just going to get to the level of white people, as though there was not systematic racism and deliberate economic empowerment that favored white people, including job reservations, that got them to where they are. So to them, it seems as though they'll just create opportunities, and all of us will suddenly get to the same level because they've created the so-called open society for all. But I do think, though, Jacob, that the DA in talking against broad-based black BEE and also talking of a value-based local government that they want to see, they are actually looking at things of who do they go to in coalitions. You remember that they're still hurting from having gone into coalition with the EFF, but also at the same time right now, because as these policy proposals stand, I do not think they appeal to any discerning black person.
And then just to wrap things up, Sbu, you spoke briefly about the leadership battles within the DA and the interim leader, John Steenhuisen, being challenged by KZN MPL Mbali Ntuli. Do you think that Mbali could be placed strategically at a more prominent position or be more in favor with the DA at the moment, just purely because of her being the right color that the DA is still trying to appeal to?
Look, the reality is that Mbali Ntuli is a brave young leader who is challenging the dominant faction within the DA, which is led by Steenhuisen and Helen Zille. And the reality is that she does not, at a personal level, I mean, you've seen the public space between Helen Zille. They've been out on social media between Helen Zille and Mbali Ntuli. So if anything, she's a headache to them, but I think that politics are about wheeling and dealing and horse trading, so we don't know what they will offer Mbali Ntuli, but I think if she goes all the way, the reality is that when you look at the power play within the DA, the reality is that Steenhuisen is set to take it, but I think that the bravery of Mbali Ntuli as a young leader and a Democrat who believes that no power should go unchallenged, I think people will respect her for that principle. As to what happens ahead of that October conference or at that October conference, it remains to be seen. There's still a month to go, and that's a long time in politics.
All right, Sbu Ngalwa, we'll leave it right there. Newzroom Africa's politics editor, Sbu Ngalwa, outlining what we can expect ahead of the DA policy conference. And of course, a month later, it'll be the leadership battle within the DA. It's going to be a very interesting 30 days for the official opposition.